Hi everyone. So our group decided to present on African swine fever. So what is African swine fever? So it's usually referred to as ASF. It's a highly contagious viral disease that affects domestic and wild swine, and it's caused by a large DNA virus of the Asaviridae family. ASF is a disease listed in the World Organization for Animal Health, or the OIE, Terrestrial Health Code, and must be reported to the OIE when it is detected. And it cannot be transmitted from swine to humans, which is good, but ASF has very serious animal health and economic consequences. So where is African swine fever found? So the disease originated in Africa, where the first cases were found in the early 1900s, and then it has slowly spread to other parts of the world, including different parts of Europe, China, Mongolia, Vietnam, and few South America countries. Luckily, ASF has never been found in the United States as of right now. So why is discussing African swine fever important? So the mortality rates of swine with African swine fever is close to 100%, so most likely the swine will pass away. African swine fever can cause major economic losses to the countries it affects. It also threatens food security and imports and exports of the meat trade, and it also limits swine production in the affected. Some of the recent African swine fever outbreaks, so in 2019, Mongolia, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Republic of Korea, Vietnam, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Cambodia, and Timor-Leste have all had outbreaks of African swine fever in their swine population. In 2020, China, the Philippines, Myanmar, and Indonesia have had outbreaks of African swine fever in their swine populations as well. And then now a new outbreak happened in Germany in September of this year, and this was Germany's first outbreak, and it caused a spiral of more cases.
So when discussing the clinical signs of ASF, you have to understand that there are different clinical signs and mortality rates depending on the virulence of the virus and the type or species of swine. In ASF's case, there are 4 different types or forms. There is acute, peracute, subacute, and chronic. Each different form of ASF has their own list of symptoms that could be involved in their sickness. For acute, they could have anything ranging from high fever, lethargy, anorexia, redness in the skin on the ears, abdomen, or legs, abortions, vomiting, diarrhea, or even possible death. As you can see, the mortality rate ranges from 3% to 100%, so there's no saying in how your swine are going to react if they do get this disease. Below that, you can see a picture of a swine that was diagnosed with the acute form, with redness in the skin on ears, abdomen, or leg. As for the peracute side, it's very different. Most peracute cases involve the sudden death of a pig with very few lesions or symptoms at all. Normally, it is near impossible to detect, but is normally determined to be the first sign of infection within a herd. For subacute clinical signs, there seem to be less intense clinical signs that can be seen for extended periods of time. They are known to be less severe, yet still very harmful for the pig and the farm, especially if it's domestic. Abortions are sometimes the first sign of an outbreak in the subacute form. Subacute mortality rates are known to be 30 to 70%. As for the chronic side of things, all of the listed signs under acute are possibilities, as well as the loss of weight, intermittent fever, respiratory signs, chronic skin ulcers, and arthritis. There are many different ways that ASF could be transmitted into your herd. The most common one is direct contact with infected domestic or wild pigs. There's also the possibility of indirect contact through ingestion of contaminated materials such as food waste, feed, or garbage, and then contaminated fomites or biological vectors such as soft ticks that are present within your farm.
When diagnosing ASF, vigilance is crucial. The only way to determine if you have an outbreak is by monitoring your herd and looking for symptoms. once you've identified potential pigs that you believe may have ASF, you can perform an antigen detection test to test for ASF, but this test can only be used in the tissues of suspected pigs. African swine fever may be identified as classical swine fever with a differential diagnosis. The only way to really control ASF is by preventing it. So if you suspect you have an outbreak, you must immediately report it to your veterinarian, and then make moves to isolate and trap the virus within the infected pigs before you spread it to the rest of your herd. Prevention in the first place can be utilized via good biosecurity measures, such as shower in, shower out facilities, and herds that don't integrate from outside populations. There is no recovery from ASF per se for individual animals. The animal usually dies of the disease or is removed from the herd. The farm itself will need to gain control over the disease and then repopulate their herd. There is no vaccine or treatment available for ASF. So when you do have an outbreak, the only way to control the disease is to depopulate all infected or exposed pigs.
Okay, so there are economic consequences of African swine fever. So farms do take a big hit if ASF gets into their herd. They tend to end up having to call large amounts of their herd from the outbreak, so losing an income profit from their swine. Also, the exports do suffer from ASF because there's not going to be those pork products coming out for the economic sustainability. Also, another kind of factor that plays in is wild animals that are infected with ASF can do a lot of external property damage to farms and surrounding areas, which also can lead to some biosecurity risk if farmers, track through a field that an animal was in but wasn't aware that that wild animal has ASF, and then they take that same foot traffic onto their farm. Now they've just kind of exposed their whole herd to ASF if they don't have a sustainable biosecurity system. So questions to think about for our presentation on African swine fever are: how do we treat ASF? How is ASF transmitted? Which country had its first ASF outbreak in September? And then lastly, true or false, there are only one clinical form of ASF. So the answers to our questions. So the first question, number 1, there is no official treatment for ASF. All you can do is basically keep your herd comfortable at the time that you have the outbreak. For question number 2, the correct answer is there are different ways to get ASF in your herd, either through direct contact with an infected domestic or wild pigs, contaminated carcass or food waste, and also contaminated fomites and contaminated equipment that are being used in your herd. For the third question, the country that had it in September was Germany. And then the fourth question, false. There are actually 4 clinical forms of ASF. Those are acute, subacute, pre-acute, and chronic.
Thank you everybody for your time. I hope everybody learned something about ASF or can at least understand how serious this is in the swine community. Here's our list of works cited. I hope you have a great day.